What if I told you that the number sitting in the average American's retirement account right now would shock you? Not because it's impressively high, but because it's terrifyingly low. And I'm not talking about people who never saved a dime or those who spent every paycheck on luxury cars and vacations. I'm talking about ordinary people who worked for 40 years, contributed to their 401k, did everything they were supposed to do, and still ended up with a number that makes financial advisors cringe. Before we dive into the actual numbers, I need you to do something. Take a wild guess right now. How much do you think the typical American has saved when they finally retire? $1 million? Because that's the number that gets thrown around constantly? Maybe $500,000? Or are you thinking it's closer to zero because you keep hearing horror stories about Americans drowning in debt? Write your guess down or just lock it in your mind, because in about 2 minutes, I'm going to reveal the real number, and I promise you, it's going to change how you think about your own retirement planning. Hi, I'm Matt, and on this channel, I break down personal finance, retirement planning, and wealth-building strategies that actually work in the real world. If you want to retire comfortably and avoid the mistakes that trap most Americans in financial mediocrity, hit that subscribe button right now. This video is going to get uncomfortable, but it's also going to arm you with the knowledge to do better than the typical person. So let's talk about what actually happens when someone retires. The typical American walks away from their job at age 62, not 65, not 67, but 62. And there's a specific reason for that timing. Age 62 is the earliest moment you can start claiming Social Security benefits, even though your monthly check gets permanently reduced if you claim that early. If you wait until 67 or even 70, your benefit increases substantially. But millions of people don't wait. Some retire early because they want to. They've saved enough, they're tired of the grind, and they're ready to enjoy life. But many more retire at 62 because they have no choice. Health problems force them out. Layoffs hit when they're too old to find another decent job. Physical jobs destroy their bodies after decades of manual labor. Caregiving responsibilities demand their full attention, or they simply run out of energy after spending 40 years in the workforce. Whatever the reason, 62 is when the savings stop growing from new income and start getting tested by reality. The paycheck disappears, the employer match vanishes, the automatic deposits end, and suddenly that number sitting in your retirement accounts becomes the most important number in your financial life. So what is that number for the typical person? Here's the truth, and I want you to brace yourself for this. According to the Federal Reserve's survey of consumer finances, the median household retirement savings for Americans approaching retirement age sits at $185,000. Let me say that again, because I know some of you are doing mental math right now. The typical household heading into retirement has around $185,000 saved in retirement accounts. That's 401ks, IRAs, and any other dedicated retirement vehicles. That's not total wealth. That's not home equity. That's not a business or savings accounts or gold coins buried in the backyard. That's strictly money set aside specifically for retirement. Now, before you start thinking that sounds pretty good, let me put this in perspective. That $185,000 needs to last potentially 30 years or more. It needs to keep pace with inflation, which has been running hot. It needs to cover rising healthcare costs that can demolish a retirement budget faster than anything else. And it needs to supplement Social Security, which was never designed to be your only source of income in retirement. So is $185,000 enough? We'll get to that calculation in a few minutes, and I think you're going to be shocked by what that actually translates to in monthly income. But here's what nobody tells you about that $185,000 median number. It's actually better than what a lot of people feared. There's this narrative that the average American has absolutely nothing saved, and while that's unfortunately true for a massive chunk of the population, the typical household that actually makes it to retirement does have something. The problem is that something isn't nearly enough. Not when you consider longevity, not when you factor in healthcare, not when you account for the lifestyle you probably want to maintain. And here's where things get even more interesting. Some of you are thinking, okay, maybe their retirement accounts are low, but what about everything else they own? What about their house? What about other assets? And this is where we need to talk about total net worth versus retirement savings, because there's a huge difference. The median net worth for households aged 55 to 64, which includes everything they own minus everything they owe, sits around $364,000. That's significantly higher than the $185,000 in retirement accounts. But here's the catch that trips up so many many people, the vast majority of that additional wealth is locked up in home equity. It's not generating cash flow. It's not dividend-paying stocks. It's not liquid. Your kitchen cabinets won't pay the electric bill, and the drywall in your bedroom won't buy groceries. Unless you sell your home and downsize, take out a reverse mortgage or rent instead of own, that home equity just sits there. It has value on paper, but it's not helping you survive month to month in retirement. So the typical household has about $185,000 in actual retirement accounts and another chunk of wealth tied up in their primary residence and maybe a paid-off car and some furniture. That's the reality. In just a moment, I'm going to break down exactly why these numbers are so low despite people working for 40 years. But first, let me ask you something. How does your own retirement savings compare to that $185,000 median? Are you ahead of the curve or falling behind? That's not a judgment, that's just math. And if you're behind, the good news is the bar to beat the typical American is actually lower than you think.
Let's get more specific about what these retirement savings numbers look like across different age groups, because understanding the trajectory helps you plan better. Americans in their 30s have a median retirement savings of around $45,000. That might sound low, but remember, they're just starting out in their peak earning years. By the time people hit their 40s, the median retirement savings climbs to roughly $141,000. Still not where it needs to be, but it's growing. Then in the 50s, we see median savings around $185,000. And here's something that surprises people. By the time Americans reach their 60s and early 70s, the median retirement savings only climbs to about $200,000. Think about that progression. From your 50s to your 60s, the median retirement savings only increases by about $15,000 to $20,000. That's a decade of work, and the needle barely moves. Why? Because many people in their late 50s and early 60s are helping kids through college, supporting aging parents, dealing with their own health issues, or getting laid off before they plan to retire. The golden years of compounding get interrupted by life. Now let's talk about what else makes up that total net worth figure. For households aged 55 to 64, the median net worth is $364,000. Subtract the $185,000 in retirement accounts, and you've got roughly $179,000 spread across everything else. The biggest piece is home equity. According to recent data, the typical American who owns a home has around $200,000 to $300,000 in home equity by retirement age, depending on the market and where they live. But again, that's illiquid. The rest of the net worth comes from things like vehicles worth maybe $10,000 to $15,000, some cash in checking and savings accounts, maybe a small brokerage account in personal property like furniture and electronics that has minimal resale value. Here's what's fascinating. The gap between average and median tells you everything you need to know about wealth inequality in America. The average retirement savings for people in their 60s is over $1.1 million, but the median is only $200,000. That means a small number of very wealthy households are dragging the average way up, while the typical person is sitting closer to that $200,000 mark. Half of all Americans approaching retirement have less than $200,000 saved. Let that sink in. And it gets worse. Over half of American households, about 54%, report having no dedicated retirement savings at all, according to the Federal Reserve. Zero, nothing. They're planning to live entirely on Social Security, which averages about $2,010 per month as of late 2025. That's roughly $24,000 per year. Try living on that in most American cities and see how far you get. But for those who are saving, here's an encouraging data point. The total 401k savings rate hit a record 14.2% in 2025. That's actually solid. It means the people who are saving are doing it right. But it also highlights a massive gap between savers and non-savers. The gap is widening every year. You're either on the track to a comfortable retirement or you're not, and there's not much middle ground anymore. So here's my question for you. What percentage of your income are you actually putting toward retirement right now? Is it 0? Is it 5%? Is it 15% or more? Because that percentage determines whether you end up in the 54% with nothing or in the group that actually has options when it's time to stop working. Now we need to address the question everyone asks when they see these numbers. Why are retirement savings so low? If people work for 40 years and earn hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars over their careers, why do they retire with only $185,000? It's not one reason. It's a perfect storm of factors that stack together and destroy retirement plans. First, financial literacy in America is abysmal. Most people never learned how investing actually works. Nobody sat them down and showed them what compound interest does to money over 30 years. Nobody explained why starting early matters so much. They hear terms like mutual funds and index funds and asset allocation, and their eyes glaze over because it sounds complicated and intimidating. So instead of investing, they do nothing. They leave money in cash, they avoid the stock market entirely, and they miss out on decades of growth. Then there's fear. A lot of Americans are genuinely scared of the stock market, and it's not irrational fear. They watched family members lose half their 401k in the 2008 financial crisis. They remember the dot-com crash wiping out retirement accounts. More recently, they saw the market drop 30% in a matter of weeks in 2020 during the pandemic. When that's your mental framework around investing, of course it feels risky. So they stick with cash and savings accounts earning 0.5% interest while inflation runs at 3% or higher, quietly destroying their purchasing power year after year. But honestly, fear and lack of knowledge aren't even the biggest problems. The real issue is that Americans prioritize today over tomorrow. It's easier to buy the new iPhone every year than to put that $1,000 into an IRA. It's more satisfying to upgrade the car or book a vacation or remodel the kitchen than to increase your 401k contribution. Those things feel good right now. Retirement feels abstract and far away. This is human nature. We're wired for immediate gratification. Delayed gratification requires discipline that most people simply don't have. And let's be real about something else. The national savings rate in America hovers around 5%. That includes all types of savings, not just retirement. 5% is pathetic. It's nowhere near enough to build a future. When you're only setting aside 5% of your income and even less is getting invested in growth assets, it's no wonder people hit their 60s feeling behind. The math just doesn't work. Here's what makes this whole situation even more frustrating. We're right around the halfway point of this video, and I want to pause for a second to tell you something important. If you're watching this and feeling anxious about your own retirement situation, you're not alone. According to recent surveys, only 35% of Americans feel on track for retirement. That means 65% of people know they're behind. But here's the good news. You now know what the typical person has saved, and you know it's not enough. That awareness alone puts you ahead of millions of people who are sleepwalking into retirement without a plan. Stick with me through the rest of this video because I'm about to show you what that $185,000 actually buys you in retirement, and more importantly, how little it takes to do significantly better. Another reason retirement savings are so low is timing. Most people don't get serious about retirement until their mid-50s. They spend their 20s paying off student loans, their 30s buying a house and raising kids, their 40s funding college savings and dealing with aging parents. By the time they reach 50 and think, wait, we actually need money for retirement, they've missed the most powerful years of compounding. Starting at 50 versus starting at 30 is the difference between retiring comfortably and retiring broke, even if you save the same monthly amount. And then there's lifestyle inflation. As people earn more, they spend more. The bigger salary goes toward a bigger house, a nicer car, fancier restaurants, and expensive hobbies. The 401k contribution stays at 3% or maybe 5% because that's all they need to get the company match, but everything else gets spent. This is why people making $150,000 per year often have the same retirement savings as people making $75,000. Higher income doesn't automatically mean higher savings. It just means more spending.
All right. Here's the moment of truth. If the typical person retires with $185,000 to $200,000 in retirement savings, what does that actually translate to in monthly income? Let's do the math, and I promise this is going to be eye-opening. Financial planners typically recommend the 4% withdrawal rule for retirement accounts. This rule suggests you can safely withdraw 4% of your portfolio each year without running out of money for at least 30 years. So if you have $200,000 saved, 4% of that is $8,000 per year, or about $667 per month. That's it. That's what 40 years of work and $200,000 in retirement savings gives you in monthly income. Some people prefer a more aggressive approach, withdrawing closer to 8% annually, which would give you roughly $1,333 per month. But if you retire right before a market crash, like in early 2022 when the S&P 500 dropped over 20%, your portfolio gets hit hard while you're simultaneously withdrawing money. That double whammy can deplete your savings faster than planned. So let's stick with the safer 4% rule. That gives the typical retiree about $667 per month from their retirement savings. Obviously, that's not enough to live on. This is why Social Security becomes absolutely critical.
The average Social Security benefit as of late 2025 is approximately $2,010 per month for retired workers. For a married couple, that's around $4,000 per month combined. Add in the $667 to $1,333 from retirement savings, and you're looking at total monthly income somewhere between $4,700 and $5,300 for a couple. Is that enough? It depends entirely on where you live and what lifestyle you expect. If you own your home outright with no mortgage and live in a low cost of living area, $5,000 per month can work. It's not luxurious, but you can cover basic expenses and live a simple, comfortable life. However, if you still have a mortgage, live in an expensive city, or want to travel and enjoy retirement, $5,000 per month is going to feel tight, really tight. And here's something that should terrify you. Healthcare costs in retirement can destroy even a solid retirement plan. The average 65-year-old couple will spend over $300,000 on healthcare throughout retirement. If you're retiring before 65, private health insurance costs can run $1,500 to $2,000 per month or more. But here's what blows my mind. If a person starts at age 30 and invests just $120 per month into an S&P 500 index fund until age 65, assuming average historical returns around 10% annually, they'll end up with roughly $200,000. That's it. $4 per day, the price of a fancy coffee. That's all it takes to match what the typical American retires with after 40 years of work. This reveals something crucial. The bar to be above average is extremely low. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to be slightly more consistent than the typical person. If you save $300 per month instead of $120, you could retire with $500,000 instead of $200,000. If you save $500 per month, you're looking at over $800,000. None of this requires massive sacrifices. It just requires discipline and starting earlier rather than later. Let me ask you directly, if you could retire with double or triple what the typical person has, would it be worth making small adjustments today? Would it be worth skipping a few unnecessary purchases each month to fund your future? I think you know the answer. So we've established that the typical person retires with around $185,000 to $200,000 in retirement savings, and we've shown that it's barely enough when combined with Social Security. But here's where things get interesting. What if those people who have $200,000 at age 62 simply don't touch it? What if they work a few more years and let that $200,000 continue growing? The power of compounding in those final years is staggering. If you leave $200,000 invested and it grows at the S&P 500's average return of about 10% annually, after just 5 years, you'd have over $320,000. Wait 10 years and you're pushing close to $520,000. By simply delaying when you start withdrawals, you can double your retirement savings without additional contributions. This strategy isn't realistic for everyone. Health issues, layoffs, and caregiving responsibilities are real, but for those who can delay retirement even by a few years, the financial impact is massive. Let's talk about what you should actually do if you're behind. First, calculate where you stand right now. Add up all your retirement accounts and compare that to the median for your age group. If you're in your 40s, the median is around $141,000. In your 50s, it's $185,000. In your 60s, it's $200,000. Are you ahead or behind? If you're behind, don't panic. The worst thing you can do is nothing. Instead, focus on these fundamentals. Increase your savings rate immediately. If you're saving 5%, bump it to 10%. Take advantage of catch-up contributions if you're over 50. In 2025, you can contribute an extra $7,500 to your 401k beyond the standard limit. Invest in low-cost index funds. Don't try to pick individual stocks or chase hot trends. Just buy broad market index funds like the S&P 500 and hold them for decades. Stop trying to time the market. Just invest consistently regardless of what's happening. Pay off high-interest debt before you retire. Credit card debt charging 20% interest will destroy your retirement faster than anything else. And consider delaying Social Security if possible. Every year you wait past your full retirement age until age 70, your benefit increases by about 8%. That's guaranteed growth you can't get anywhere else. Here's what I want you to take away from this. The typical American retires with $185,000 to $200,000 in retirement savings. Combined with Social Security, that provides a basic but not comfortable lifestyle. The good news is you don't have to be typical. The bar is low. A little bit of consistency and discipline will put you miles ahead of the average person. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to be intentional. Start now, not next month or next year. Increase your contributions, invest in simple, low-cost funds, avoid high-interest debt, and give compounding time to work its magic. Decades from now, when you're sitting on a retirement nest egg that's double or triple what the typical person has, you'll thank yourself for making these changes today. The question is, will you actually do it, or will you end up like everyone else, reaching 62 with barely enough to get by?